Welcome back to part 2 of the restoration of my 82 Mustang GT, which I've nicknamed the Rotter. In the previous video, linked in the description, I covered the work that went into this project to get it ready for paint. For the full car repaint, I used base coat clear coat urethane automotive paint. This paint is expensive, in fact, considering that this receipt doesn't even show the cost for the clear coat or the reducers. Once everything was prepped, masked off, cleaned, and degreased, I laid down 3 coats of medium red base coat. Base coat always looks flat once it's dry. After adequate flash time, I added 3 coats of urethane clear to give the paint the shine and UV protection. I painted not only the body, but also all the miscellaneous smaller parts at the same time. Everything was given adequate time to dry before proceeding. While the paint hardened, I went on to clean and paint miscellaneous moldings using semi-flat black. I've always had good luck using spray can paint for this sort of work. Once painted, both sail panels were reinstalled on the quarter panels. I also painted the mirror mounting portion of both doors black. The front bumper rub strip was also painted black to match the rest of the side moldings that will be installed later in this video. The next task was to start on the interior. I purchased half a dozen cans of SEM paint dye specifically for hard interior plastics. I used color code 15273, which is Napa Red, mimicking Canyon Red from 1984. Since the dash was already installed, I just masked it off and sprayed it in place within the car. Next, I moved to the rear quarter, interior trim panels, and associated smaller parts. Before the interior carpet and plastic panels were installed, I needed to finish the floor panels. I painted all of the floorboards with a heavy coat of silver gray enamel paint. While the floors dried, I turned attention to the weather stripping on the doors. Remember, this is a T-top car, so the doors don't have the normal frame around the window. So specific weather strip components were ordered and installed around the mirrors and at the rear edge of both doors. I purchased a box of X-Mat from Eastwood for undercarpet sound deadening. Installation is fairly straightforward, just be sure to wear gloves. The foil outer layer is somewhat rigid and extremely sharp. Next up was installation of the carpet. I sourced an original Canyon Red carpet from a low mileage but wrecked 84 GT 350 Mustang. It looks right at home in my car now. Next was the installation of the front seats. For my parts stash, I had previously purchased a set of newer Aero units, which cleaned up pretty well. The T-top end trim caps needed some loving. It was easier to repair the original damaged cap instead of trying to find a good used one. After that, more SEM interior paint was applied to the miscellaneous interior components, including the center console. The rear seat, which was sourced used, was installed, then the center console was installed and tested. Finally, a set of 84 Mustang door panels finished up the inside. At this point, I'd still not installed the front or rear glass. The car was prepped by installing all of the trim clips front and back, as well as the rubber trim that sits under the rear window. I had a local company come to my house to take care of both the windshield and the rear hatchback glass. Note that the Rotter was last inspected back in 1999. Also worth noting, the windshield is an original Carlite glass noted by the W900 part number. The urethane installation materials the professionals used makes a much better, longer-term solution as opposed to trying to do this part of the project yourself. Finally, the Rotter is weather tight, not that I'm going to let it sit outside in the rain anytime soon. After the glass install, I went to the cut and buff phase of the repaint. At this point, the new paint had adequate time to cure. The term cutting actually refers to wet sanding, which was done by hand, and started with 1000 grit, then 1500, and finally 2000 grit. This leaves the paint finish dull, but it flattens out any imperfections in a clear coat. Buffing follows wet sanding and starts with rubbing compound to remove the 2000 grit sanding scratches and starts to bring out the shine. After compound, I move to polishing with glazing compound to bring out the final shine. Inside and outside pictures show the gloss from the cut and buff process. Once the paint is finally finished, I'm back to installing stuff. The next batch of stuff is the side moldings or rub strips. I had most of the pieces but needed to source new door moldings. Prep work includes a good cleaning as well as removing the old adhesive from the back of the moldings. I also painted the rear bumper cover back to black. Once the side moldings are on the car, I wanted to finish up the exhaust. The original dual tip was actually on the car but basically unusable. I fabbed up my own 82 GT twin tailpipe, starting with the standard LX 5-liter tailpipe 2¼ inches diameter. I then shortened the LX tailpipe before welding on an eBay special chrome dual tip. While it's not 100% original, the end result looks good to me. Back to the side moldings, I needed to pinstripe the dual red stripes. The first attempt was a major fail. First of all, the color was too red. Second, the adhesion was just crap. I guess you get what you pay for. I found another supplier with better quality pinstripe that actually had a closer color match to the body color. I restriped the entire car with better results. After the pinstripe, I spent some time painting the rear wheel wells to eliminate any overspray. And then new front brakes, including rotors, pads, calipers, and hoses, went on the car. Back in the interior, I had ordered a replacement headliner from one of the reputable aftermarket Mustang suppliers. The material matched the original very well, and installation was tedious but uneventful. After the headliner, I went on and installed a new radio. Rather than trying to source an original or use an aftermarket unit, I had a Ford stock radio from an Aero era car. It took a bit of adaptation to the dash, but the end result looks pretty decent. Another tidbit for the interior is the hatch cover that is used on cars with the rear window wiper to hide the wiper assembly inside the car. Painted that too. Next issue was a steering wheel. I pulled it out of the car, actually almost broke my puller, and started the process of restoration. The leather is actually in really good shape, but the exposed metal surface had rust. After lots of hand sanding, masking, and a fresh coat of rust encapsulation primer and paint, the wheel looked fresh. Reinstalled that back into the car. Wheels. I have no idea what came on this car originally, but I've always liked the look of the original TRX rims. I had a handful of rims, but needed to source a few more to get a decent set of 4. Some of the rims I used had been painted, so using chemical stripper I got rid of any paint in the original clear coat. Final result after all the cleanup looks great, but they do still need to be clear coated. The center caps also needed attention. I separated the outer aluminum skin from the plastic inner shell. This allowed me to gently remove any dings and other minor surface imperfections, and then start the sanding process. Once the skin was reattached, I attached each center cap to my buffer so I could mimic the original brushed finish. Again, they still need to be cleared, coated in the future. And yes, I know these rims take metric tires. I do have a set of good used 220 stored in my basement for potential use at car shows. Also along the way, I picked up a set of used 15-inch black mesh rims and tires off Craigslist. They cleaned up pretty well, but they were missing the center caps. I actually found a seller in Thailand that sold new center caps, and they fit the rims really well. The rotor is currently riding on these rims and tires. That's the status of the rotor as of July 2019. I originally had intentions to finish the car up in 2020, but things got delayed and the car has been in storage since then. Just recently, I got the bug to get the car out of storage and have continued with a dozen or so tasks to finish it up. That'll be the subject of part 3. The new goal is to have the rotor on the road in the spring of 2022. Hope you enjoyed the journey. Thanks for following along thus far.